And so this is the situation that we have had, that in the last 2 weeks, over 144 people documented have lost their lives in both Plateau and Benue states. We'll be speaking right now with retired captain of the U.S. Army, Bish Johnson, who is a security expert, who joins us virtually about these issues, what he makes of these incessant killings. Captain Bish Johnson, good morning and welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm sure you must have been paying attention to these issues and wondering when these things will stop. But from your own estimation, what would you say has gone wrong once more for us to see a resurgence of these killings?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. We've been on this issue of insecurity in Nigeria for quite a long period of time. In fact, as a matter of fact, I had to take a break a little bit because we keep having the same conversation over and over again, and the same thing keep happening. See, the problem is that the insecurity in Nigeria, particularly Plateau, Benue State, the Middle Belt area, is far beyond just that of the responsibility of security agencies. There are much deeper issues that need to be addressed in those areas. It seems that all of the governance structures in Nigeria, not just the Middle Belt, had broken down. I listened to the governor's address, though I didn't quite get the part that I think was more relevant in addressing this issue from my own perspective, and that is the issue of activating community-based efforts. You see, we can't get away from that. We can never run away from ensuring that local governance structures remain intact. And I continue to say that. Until we can make local government areas effective, because the state governor cannot be everywhere, the president can't be everywhere, security agencies can't be everywhere, and security is everybody's business. Until we can ensure that our local government areas are functioning effectively like they used to function before. There used to be a time that you have no business going to your state capital because all of the governance issues that you require in your life are addressed for you effectively at the local government level. Until we can get to that point, we will continue to run into all these problems that we are having right now. We don't want to tell ourselves the truth. The truth is that all of our local-based governance structures have broken down. The local government structure is broken down. The traditional rulers are not functioning as they used to function before. They have been politicized. Our religious leaders are no longer playing the kind of roles that they used to play before. Community development committees, youth associations, all these things are no longer as effective as they used to be before. They have all been politicized. Politicians have hijacked them and they installed their studios in some of all these places, and that is why we see the problems that we are seeing right now. So we have to take the bull by the horn and begin to address some of these local governance structures if we want to restore Nigeria to the past glories that it used to be before when we were growing up.
It's very significant that you said that. I mean, and we're looking at the battle that we've faced in trying to get funding to the local government in the bid to wake them up. And we've seen the pushback that has been witnessed. It's unclear, what is going to happen now, because it does appear that there's a stalemate in that direction. But some people will say, in spite of the challenges that we've faced in, getting local governments back on their feet, there has been relative calm and quiet in some of these areas before we now started to see a resurgence. It cannot just all be tied to local governance, can it?
It's not just only local governance. All of the various levels of government have to play their role, the federal, the states, and the local. And also with the civil societies, the population, security agencies. You see, none of all these people can achieve total peace in any part of any country in the world. It requires collective effort, everybody working together, the government providing governance, the citizens providing followership, good followership, enforcing the laws, regardless of whose horse is gone, and removing politics is most of all these things. I can tell you, for example, that if you look at local government, you see what has been happening with local government elections. Every time there's a local government election, it's only the party of the governor that wins all the seats. They win, if it's 1 million local government chairman, they win all 1 million. If it's 1 billion councillors, it's the governor's party that wins all the 1 billion councillors. And you begin to ask yourself, how is that possible? So all these things have been politicized. And because they have been politicized, the people who are popular with the communities don't seem to emerge when it comes to the local government. And even in the case of traditional institutions, they have also been politicized. There's hands of government and politicians in selecting who becomes a traditional ruler and who doesn't become. And sometimes they are imposed on these people. And all these things are flashing points to some of the problems that we are having. The same thing with CDC chairman and youth association. Nothing happens by the will of the people. You see, power has to have legitimacy derived from somewhere. And legitimacy to power comes from the people. When you have a situation where authorities or powers are imposed on the people, they will resist. And sometimes the resistance takes the forms of this kind of violence that you see. So it's a deep-rooted, complex structure that requires multifaceted approach, not just security-wise or security agents, not just the president, not just the governor. It requires everybody playing a role, their own role. Everybody has a role to play. It's like a symbiotic community where everybody is playing a role that everybody is benefiting from, and that is when you have a cohesive and peaceful society.
I tell you that my colleague Ayo has been a major champion for local government autonomy on the program over the years, and I know he certainly has questions to ask you. Ayo.
Thank you, Malcolm. There was something, Captain, it's good to see you again. There was a question that I wanted to ask our guest yesterday. The reason for the emergency declaration the emergency rule in Rivers State was unrest, was signs of imminent unrest or violence or danger or whatever. That is enshrined in the Constitution. Now, the Constitution also provides that if there is any such thing, and the president can also declare a state of emergency to address issues. I remember in 2004, it was for the same reason that the president of the day declared a state of emergency to regulate things in that environment. The current president, has made some comments. But first of all, do you see a ground, because it seems to be a repetitive situation, once in Plateau, and then another one not too far away in Benue State. Do you see a reason for a call for a state of emergency by some?
Well, look, the state of emergency happens everywhere around the globe. I can't even count the number of times that the former president of the US, Joe Biden, declared the state of emergency in various parts of the United States. The reason why state of emergency is declared is to remove some bureaucratic bottlenecks and allow government to be able to deploy assets and resources to tackle a specific problem. Now, for the US, for example, when they have hurricanes or tornadoes, we are going to, wreak havoc on their various communities, the president declares state of emergency to eliminate some bureaucratic bottlenecks that will now enable them to marshal out resources and assets and channel them to that area. The same thing can be done here in Nigeria. Unfortunately, when we see state of emergency declaration in Nigeria as a reason to dismantle democratic institutions that are actually supposed to work hand in hand with the government at the center to ensure that these assets and resources are appropriately applied to solve the problem. A state of emergency declaration does not necessarily entail the dismantling of democratic institutions, because you need those democratic institutions to work hand in hand in whatever measures that you're trying to put in place to tackle that problem. Yeah, a state of emergency can be declared in some of all these hot spots, if it is not going to require the removal of the dismantling of democratic institutions, because those democratic institutions are vital to helping government to curb whatever problem is trying to curb there.
Okay,
if you
Captain,
dismantle democratic institutions, they will fight back, and you find yourself back in the same position where, or they even sabotage your effort.
My apologies,
so
Captain. It would seem like you know, the issue is becoming unnecessarily repetitive. The president said in a statement, and I believe it will also come on screen for you to see in a short while. He said, and I quote, "We cannot allow this devastation and the tit-for-tat attacks to continue. Enough is enough." That's from the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. What does that tell you?
Well, I've read that statement as was publicized by the spokesperson to the president. You know, Ayo, we have had this kind of statements issued over and over again. Even in the previous administration, there were similar statements of this nature, even the one before that administration. What we really need is action. We need action. And that action, I've had, you know, even in that same statement, they say that the governor should try to solve that problem. These problems are far beyond the governors themselves alone. I think the governors also do also need some federal assistance. So what I'm thinking that ought to happen is that all of the levels of government and all of the facets of the society have to come together. I didn't hear the other part of the statement, the address from the governor of Plateau State. I think he was going in that direction. We have to get the people involved. The people are part of they're part of the problem, so they should also be part of the solution to the problem. But the government has to provide the platform and the environment for these discussions to take place, so that we can find a lasting solution to these problems. Okay. What we have done in Nigeria over the past is bandage solutions to very serious problems. We simplify very complicated problems and we find bandage solutions to them, and we throw the can down the road, and then next administration comes aboard. You see the same issues repeating themselves. We have to do better than that.
The former governor also put out a statement, a former governor of Plateau State to be precise. That's Governor, he's now Senator Jonah Jang, former governor of Plateau State, says, and I quote, perhaps like referencing what the president said, look, it's like the president really needs to know and understand the real situation of things and then be able to do the needful. But he said this, and I quote, "The attacks in Plateau State are not merely communal disputes. They are perpetrated by a known group with a specific agenda." He's been quoted as saying. Again, what does that say to you?
Well, whether it is perpetrated by a known group or not, there must be solution to the problem. If
the point that I'm making, my apologies.
It makes the problem much more easier for us to tackle.
Yeah, just a second, Captain. The point that I'm making is, it would seem like these are known, not abstract elements. They are not ghosts. They are people that are known by some people and in some communities. And it would seem like this has been the system for a while. Former governor of Kaduna State, Governor El Rufai at the time, also said that they know some of these people. We heard in Zamfara State as well, when the governor of the day also said, we know these people. But why do these problems seem to persist, even though people tend to know the people who are behind these things, perhaps reason for the president's comments? So do you see politics, or is this just sheer security issue?
I said it in my opening statement. There is politics in all of all these things. If the people are known, we know who they are, it makes our problem much more easier for us to solve. Unfortunately, we know the people, but the problems continue to persist for decades now. So that tells you that there is a lot more, probably politics is what is driving that. There are people who are benefiting from this, from the chaos that is taking place in all of all these places. And all these people will continue to fight to ensure that that chaos continue to reign. We saw it with Boko Haram. There were people benefiting from the chaos in the Boko Haram ravaged areas. And so those people continue to thrive in that chaos and continue to resist any attempt, any effort by government or anybody to stop the chaos. And so, yes, I can't rule out the possibility of politicians having hands in the problem that is happening in Plateau State, because I find it very difficult to believe that we know the people who are perpetrating these crimes, and yet the crimes continue to take place. So it means that they are being protected by very, very powerful people, either within that area or even outside the area.
But it would seem like, are we then just, you said the other time, we bandage serious issues, or as one of my colleagues would say, we tend to paper over cracks. So do you see this coming to an end indeed? Or it's a cycle that's just going to continue? We understand that the one in Plateau State, for instance, has gone on for about 2 decades.
Yeah. And I've been in your studio several times long ago when I first returned to this country in 2012. Mokwe can attest to that. And we have been discussing this particular issue. Since that time till now, we're still talking about that. Now, if we continue in the direction, the trajectory that we have been going on all this while, I'm sorry, the problem will continue. But, I heard from that statement that was released by Mr. President when he said enough is enough. And I think enough is enough. Now, if we agree that enough is enough, we're going to have to take a different direction. We have to take a different trajectory and take very serious measures to look at these issues, find out who are the people behind it, the reason why they're behind it, and then we dismantle those people and then eliminate those reasons for which they are perpetrating this various violence across all these places. And then until we do that, I am sorry and I'm afraid the violence will continue. It will just come up and then we'll rush in and provide some remedial measures, and then we'll go back to our homes, and several weeks or months down the road, we still see the same thing repeat itself.
Strongly you hold the president's statement in this regard. Do you think that you're seeing sufficient political will to bring this to an end? Because he seems to be asking the governors to do the work. We've been at this for 2 decades, he says, and that this, is rooted in ethnicity and religion, and that they have the tools for solution. He's asked also the military, the security agencies, to be on the offensive with the people causing this carnage. Do you think that this has demonstrated sufficient political, capacity, or will I say interest, to bring this conflict to an end?
No, I don't think that the president will have to do off-hands approach in these problems. You just alluded to the fact that even as the violence were taking place in Plateau State, the same thing was also happening in Benue State. When you have problems across various states, it becomes a federal problem. And so the federal government can't hands off on this problem. They're going to have to get engaged, fully engaged, and even supervise the solution to this problem. Sometimes these problems are far.
Oh dear, it does appear that we have a technical hitch. I'm hoping that... Oh yes, you were frozen for a bit. I see you're back, Captain Bish Johnson.
Okay. Yes, the governors themselves don't have all the tools to solve this problem. Sometimes governors are not the most powerful individuals in their states. There are people more powerful than the governors in their states. And if these people are the ones behind all these atrocities that are taking place in those states, the governors won't be able to solve those problems.
Let me ask you quickly. Sorry to interrupt you. Let me ask you very quickly. We've been discussing this issue, as you rightly said, for years now. How would you say your perspective, as somebody who just came freshly to the country, has changed from someone who has now experienced and perhaps understood these issues a bit more?
Well, I think from looking backwards and and trying to answer this question that you just asked right now about how my perspective has changed. You see, I believe that we have enough manpower and the intelligence to solve most of all these problems in Nigeria. But at the same time, I think that politics has eaten so deep into the fabric of Nigeria that complicate the various solutions that have been provided that could have solved some of all these problems. Now, take for example, why should we have cattle roaming the streets in 2025? If you look at the countries where they have people that even produce more, they produce more cattle than we do here in Nigeria. And you don't see cattle roaming the streets. How complicated is it for us to, take what those people have done, bring it back to Nigeria and domesticate them here in Nigeria, and then eliminate that factor? Some people have said it's farmers, herders, clashes. Okay, that can be easily be eliminated if we can look at how we can assist those cattle rearers with their cattle. Because sometimes too, you see some people say, look, it's a personal business, therefore only them should. No, it doesn't work like that. When something has become a factor in creating violence and crisis that affects everybody, everybody is going to have to make some sacrifice to eliminate that factor. So if we take that off the table, issue of harder farmers clashes, then we'll see what is left. Now, from that, we now begin to tackle those things that are left, and we begin to find the solutions to them. But the thing is that the problem in Nigeria is mostly political, and it's mostly for self-interest. And so long as people are benefiting from the status quo, they will continue to perpetuate their status quo. And that is what I have understood about Nigerian problems. So sometimes it just seems like it's a situation that is very irredeemable.
Part of the reason why the federal government created the livestock ministry was because of this. I mean, it was largely created to be able to see how we can remove that farmer-herders conflict from all of the myriads of conflicts that we're currently facing. It's early days yet, but how optimistic are you that perhaps that ministry might be able to solve at least that singular part of the current conflict that we're seeing?
Well, I know the ministry was just barely created, so we just have to give them that benefit of doubt. Depending on who is running the ministry and how seriously the government wants to take that, I won't foreclose a situation where they're able to find lasting solution to the farmer-herders clashes, because we have to find a way to eliminate that factor. If we don't eliminate that factor, whether it's farmer-herders clashes that is causing this problem, all of them will just hide under farmer-herders clashes and continue to perpetuate other crimes. So we eliminate that factor first, and then we'll see what is left, and then we'll find a way to begin to deal with whatever that is left. I am hoping that the Minister of Livestock will be able to study this situation and be able to put in a good format that can be followed to solve the problem. I don't see why cattle should be roaming the streets in 2025. I think we have to, it's time we begin to look at what others are doing and do the same thing. We're not the only country in the world that have cattle. And I don't seem to have this kind of problems in all these other various countries where they're rearing cattle. So we should look at what they're doing and bring them here and domesticate them.
Captain Bish Johnson, well, we hope that we'll catch up with you very soon again. Thank you so much for your contributions on Sunrise City this morning.
Thank you for having me.